Good morning, everyone. As Dan said, my name is Nancy, and my family and I have been attending JCC since 2013. I'm currently taking part in a course which is put on by the Newground family of churches. Some of you will be aware of it. It's called Academy. Any of my Academy friends out there? Yeah. When I started Academy, Dan asked me what some of my goals were, and I said very enthusiastically, I want to preach. And then he actually asked me to preach. And then I realized, oh, wow, I really have to do this now. So here goes. Welcome to our 2024 Advent preaching series entitled It's Now. Over the next 4 weeks, myself and other members of our church will be unpacking Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Now, it's a bit strange to be talking about the birth of Jesus, an event that happened over 2,000 years ago, by saying it's now. But what's even stranger is that we are actually focusing on words spoken by the prophet Isaiah, which were spoken 700 years before Jesus was born, which means that this passage was written an estimated 2,700 years ago, which isn't now. So why are we talking about Isaiah? Who is he? Where does he fit in the big story of the Bible? And what on earth does he have to do with Christmas? To begin to answer that question, let's zoom out from the passage a bit and put things into context. If we look at the Old Testament, which is the first half of the Bible before Jesus was on earth, we see the story of how God was faithful to the nation of Israel, telling them he would turn them into a great nation if they obeyed him and kept his commandments. In Genesis 22:17, God says to Abraham, who is known as the father of the Jewish people, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. And after Abraham, God restated the covenant to Moses in Exodus 19:5 and 6. Now, if you obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure, and from among you all the peoples on earth, for all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. God also promised David, king of Israel, that someone from his family line would sit on the throne forever. 2 Samuel 7:16, your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me, and your throne will be established forever. This is a covenant and a promise that God made to the Jewish people. God made promises to the people of Israel, but they were also required to keep his laws and statutes. But as we read on in the story, we see that Israel didn't obey God's laws, and they went their own way. By the time you reach the part in the Old Testament about the kings and the judges, we see that Israel was far from a great nation, far from following God's ways and falling so far short of God's best plan. But praise God, he remained and remains faithful even when his people were unfaithful. And because God is faithful to his promises, he sent a series of men called the prophets. A prophet is someone whom God would speak to through a variety of ways, and they would share God's message with the people, and they would remind the people of God's commands and his covenants, and they would call the people back to God, and they would speak of a future hope. But you will hear more of that in the coming weeks. Isaiah, the author of our Advent passage, was a prophet. At the time Isaiah comes onto the scene, the land was in turmoil. Israel was living in sin, and they were not honoring God. In the first chapter of his book, he paints a grim picture of the people of Israel. Isaiah 1 verse 2, the children I raised and cared for have rebelled against me. And in verse 4, oh, what a sinful nation they are, loaded down with the burden of guilt. They are evil people, corrupt children who have rejected the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel and turned their backs on him. The chapter goes on to describe in great detail the horrible state the nation of Israel was in because they hadn't followed God's commandments. So going through the rest of today and the rest of the Advent series, please remember this potted history I have given you of the story leading up to the time of Isaiah's prophecy. So can we have the first slide, please? Okay, next one. And maybe the next one. That's what I want. Yeah, thank you. So now we finally come to the verse I'm focusing on. Isaiah 9, verse 1. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by way of the sea beyond the Jordan. Now, when I was reflecting on this verse, the first thing that jumped out at me were the names Zebulun and Naphtali. So you can have the next slide, please. Now, please don't judge me on my photo editing skills, but you can see on the slide, hopefully you can see that Zebulun and Naphtali were two of the tribes of Israel, and that's the land area that the tribes were in when Isaiah would have been prophesying his words. So the verse says that the lands were humbled, but how? In my research, I discovered that was referring to when the lands of Zebulun and Naphtali were conquered and taken into exile by the Assyrian Empire. That is quite humbling. I thought God had promised Israel they would be a great and mighty nation, but here they are, taken into captivity. How does that match up? I'm sure we all have situations in our own lives that just don't match up to what God promised us. Whether it's a result of our own choices or things that were completely beyond our control, what we see in front of us doesn't seem to match up what was promised, and perhaps we feel full of gloom and distress, like was mentioned in the first part of the verse. Maybe it's loss of relationship, loneliness, financial struggles, mental health challenges. The list goes on, and I'm sure you can all fill in your own blank there. Maybe if you're a new Christian, you might be tempted to think, I thought once I became a Christian, all of this would be sorted. Or maybe you have been a follower of Jesus for some time, and you might just think, where is God in my situation? And perhaps our friends in Zebulun and Naphtali felt similar things. How can this be? Aren't we God's chosen people? But there was hope for Zebulun and Naphtali. If we could go to the next slide. Now, hopefully you can see what I've written there. So fast forward from Isaiah to the book of Matthew, 700 years later to the time when Jesus was on earth. We read, leaving Nazareth, this is Jesus, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said by the prophet Isaiah, land of Zebulun and Naphtali, the way to the sea along the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. That's Matthew 4:13-15. So if you can see on the slide, the city where Jesus went and lived, Capernaum, is right there in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Jesus went and did a lot of his ministry in the same region which Isaiah prophesied would be honored. God spoke the words of Isaiah 9 verse 1 through his spirit to Isaiah, and Jesus, the Son of God, fulfilled the prophecy 700 years later. The land and the people of Zebulun and Naphtali, who were once taken into captivity by enemy armies, were redeemed and honored by Jesus living there, doing ministry there, and performing many miracles in their midst. A land that was once covered in shame and disgrace is redeemed and restored. God is a redeemer and a restorer. He restored honor to the land that was taken into exile, and where the rest of Israel may have discounted them, may have seen them with a tarnished history, God saw them as worthy. He didn't base his ministry in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. He wasn't after a physical throne in a palace, which would have been in Jerusalem. He went to the land that was once decimated. So thinking back to those areas in your life that seem like they just don't match up, that seem desolate and forgotten, whatever that is for you, God doesn't want you to sweep the pain under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. He wants to redeem the broken areas of your life. I don't know your specific situation, and I don't know what God's timeline is for you. But one of the truths of God is that he is a redeemer and he does restore. And that is a hope and a promise that you can have now. Take your areas of brokenness and disappointment to him, and he will, in his perfect timing, bring healing. It's not a click of your fingers magic trick that everything gets sorted in an instant. For these lands, it took 700 years, but walk with Jesus and submit to his ways, and he will bring restoration. The second thing that struck me about the verse, it was the phrase, Galilee of the Gentiles. Gentiles are non-Jewish people, like most of us in the room. Not everyone, though. The verse says, Galilee of the Gentiles will be honored. As we already know, Jesus did a lot of his earthly ministry in the city of Capernaum. Capernaum was a trading city which was on important travel routes and was home to Jews and Gentiles. This location would have allowed Jesus' message to have gone out to many people. People would have traveled into the city and taken the message of Jesus back out with them. Mark 1:28 tells us, news about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. The Jewish people may have been expecting a king to come and sit on David's throne, doing what they thought would fulfill the promise to King David hundreds of years before. But much to their surprise, Jesus wasn't concerned with taking over a palace or becoming a military general. He wanted to spread his gospel to as many people as possible. Many of the world leaders today are power hungry and seeking their own fame. But Jesus never wanted to win an election or live in a palace. He came to point people to his Father who sits on the throne of heaven. We can see in more familiar parts of the Christmas story, the message of Jesus has always been for all people. In Luke 2:10, when the angels are speaking to the shepherds, they say, don't be afraid, I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. The star was revealed to the wise men who came from the east, beyond Israel. They were almost certainly not Jewish. In Matthew chapter 8, we read that Jesus healed the servant of a Roman centurion while in Capernaum. In Luke 17, one of the 10 lepers, not leopards, Jesus healed was a Samaritan. And again in Matthew 15, we read of Jesus healing the daughter of a Canaanite woman. This would have blown the minds of Jesus' disciples, as they would have been taught they were waiting for a Messiah to come save the Jewish people. Yes, the Jews have a special place in God's plan, Yes, the Jews have a special place in God's plan, but it has always been on the heart of God that his message is for all people of all nations. Even before Jesus was born, God had already planned for the Gentiles to be grafted in. 700 years before Jesus was born, God was speaking to his people through Isaiah, but was also thinking of the Gentiles, including you and me. So if you are in the room or listening online and you're thinking, well, that's all well and good for them, but that really isn't for me, I'm telling you that it is. It is for you. Do not discount yourself from this. His good news of salvation is for all people. That is a promise and a hope that you can have now. And as we go through the sermon series between now and Christmas, I implore you to remember that although Jesus was born such a long time ago, and Isaiah's words were written such a long time before that, the principles and the truths are still very relevant today. It is now that we can hold on to these promises. He is a redeemer and a restorer, and his good news is for all people. So now we're going to welcome up Vern for the next part of the message. Thank you for your time.
Hey, my name's Dan Baptist and I'm lead pastor here at Jubilee Community Church. We really hope that something from this morning's word has blessed you and reached you. And if you'd like to talk about anything you've heard or just be able to talk about maybe faith or get some prayer, then please get in contact. You can email us, give us a call at the centre, and one of the team's going to get back to you. We'd love to do this, especially if you're just thinking about what it is to become a Christian. You want to sit down and really talk that through with anyone. We also run regularly on a Sunday some Joining the Church courses. And if you want to know more about Jubilee Community Church and what it is to belong here, then you can just find out online when the next one of those is going on, and you can attend, have a meal, sit down, talk about it. We also have some amazing midweek group life where it's a great opportunity to dig further into your faith. Again, you can find out that on our website too. Anyway, just wanted to say hi and bless you, and we'll catch up soon.